Hey guys, and today we're going to talk about WWDC 2011, the conference held by Apple on Monday, June 6th. Now, you're probably thinking, this sounds familiar, I've just seen a video on this, or maybe you saw it a while ago. Apple announced several things at this year's conference, one being macOS 10 Live, which we already covered and the video is on the channel, the other two being iOS 5 and iCloud. So which one are we covering in this video? Well, the answer to that is iOS 5, the next major iteration of Apple's mobile operating system for mobile devices, that being the iPhone, iPod Touch and iPad. This was a much hyped release, and I kind of jumped on a theory many months ago that because the last year with the iPhone 4 was the first major iteration to the hardware of the devices, I speculated that the iOS 5 this year would be the next major iteration to the software of these devices. And while we didn't see any massive UI changes, because the kind of grid of icons view is synonymous with Apple design now, we did see some pretty good feature changes. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go through most of the features that Apple talked about and talk about them. So the first thing to note is that iOS 5 will be or work on the same hardware that iOS 4 worked on, that being of course the iPhone 4, iPhone 3GS, iPhone 3G to a less degree, and iPod Touch 3rd and 4th generations. It also works on the iPad 1 and the iPad 2. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's just dive in. If you think of what someone's complained about most when they've talked about iOS, a lot of you will probably think of notifications, and Apple certainly did. The first major feature they announced, and that's where we're going to start, because the first thing they announced, so it makes sense to be the first thing they talk about. They made a splash with the first feature. After they'd gone through some statistics, they jump right in, and they normally jump in with some quite boring feature announcements, but I could say the first part of the Lion keynote served as that. They jumped straight into the feature announcements, and one of the most prevalent ones. So the first feature we're going to talk about, and I've got my iPad here to use as a frame of reference, as I did in the first video. We're just going to go down the list and talk about some of the bigger feature announcements. So it says here, and sorry for looking down, this is where I've got the notes. The first big feature, I was talking about it while I'm doing this, was notification center, because as I was saying, that was one of the biggest complaints that people had about the previous iteration. It popped up this quite big, quite obnoxious notification window, and it interrupted you and cancelled out what you're doing. Also, and I can show you this, if we look on the lock screen, we have no, just show you real quick, all we have available to us in the way of information is the date and the time, which might have been fine for the first generation OS, but then Android kicked in and started to revolutionise things with its notification system, and I think to let's do a WebOS. So let's talk about what was actually brought. So they brought something called Notification Center, and it's very Android-esque. It's a notification area that slides down from the top with all your recent notifications. They showed text messages, and that's something we'll talk about in a minute, as one of the most prominent examples. Also, as part of that notification area, you can put weather and stocks widgets, just exclusive to that top bar. So it's its own self-contained area that you can access from anywhere within the application. This lock screen I talked about, you can also access most of those from the lock screen. You can enable, disable notifications, and you can also, at the moment in the iOS 5 beta, disable those new notifications in favour of the old boxy style ones, although I don't know why you would. The next feature we're going to talk about is, we're going to kind of go in the order, Newsstand. Now, particularly when the iPad came out, first generation, a lot of people were speculating that new magazines, newspapers and books would be a very high feature on it. They certainly were, but magazines weren't properly integrated and didn't have their own defined place, as books, apps and music did with iBooks, the App Store and iTunes respectively. Apple has rectified that now by creating a feature called Newsstand. What it is an icon on your home screen that basically looks like a folder. It opens out all your magazines, shows the covers of them, and allows you to enter any one of them. It's also got a link to go to the store right from there. So, and it kind of opens up a folders-esque view, kind of like this, where it shows all your magazines in one place. It's kind of a cross between, I would say, folders and the iBook store. So that's kind of nice. Goes along with the new subscription model that Apple have built. I wasn't expecting that, but it's certainly nice. Okay, those were kind of necessary but boring features to start off with. Let's talk about some other stuff. Get my page back over here. The next thing I wanted to talk about, and I believe, the next thing they talked about was reminders. It's a reminder app, to-do app, lots of them in the App Store already, but it's integrated into the operating system. So a lot of people say, why wouldn't I just use calendar appointments for this? Well, this can actually triangulate your GPS signal and associate a location for where you need to be for the reminder. So the example they used in the keynote, and Scott Forstall was given as part of the keynote. So he said, if my wife wanted me to call her after I finished this presentation, I could set up a GPS net so that as soon as I left the convention centre today, it would remind me to call my wife. So I can imagine pretty annoying for some people, but the feature's there if you want it. Obviously that will also have full integration with Notification Center, like we just talked about. Next on the list is full Twitter integration, and that's not full Twitter integration of the Twitter app like some people were speculating, nor is it Facebook integration. It is just Twitter, and it's not the normal Twitter integration as such, like you'd expect. It's Twitter from within other apps, but with a native API. so you can't necessarily tweet from anywhere. But for example, if you've just taken a picture, which revisions to the camera app is something we'll talk about later, but if you've taken a picture, you can press a little button to deal with that and send that, but it's not a full Twitter client integrated into the operating system. It's just bits of the Twitter API integrated into bits of iOS, and I believe that has full developer access and will be coming to the iPhone 4, iPad and iPod Touch. You get to that from system preferences, so you only have to sign in once. As I kind of alluded to earlier, you've got better camera app on all devices, and one kind of interesting thing with them trying to juice up the lock screen, like I was talking about before, because it's all patched. And well, when they were trying to juice up the lock screen, they decided to put a camera button, so you can quickly gain access to your camera without having to unlock the phone, find the camera app, and do all that. In my mind, still not a substitute for a physical camera button, but I don't think Apple will that was really Apple's style. We'll talk about physical buttons now, actually, in relation to the cameras. So they added some auto exposure stuff, auto red eye, really nice for my photo. They're talking about how this is a really popular camera now, because cameras on phones are probably typically what people are going to use, because you presume you've got them with you all the time. So that's quite a nice feature that they're adding to try and make it a more generally useful camera. I believe, although I'm not sure on this, I believe it's also got face detection now. So that's something if there is an 8 megapixel camera on the iPhone 5, which, just for the record, wasn't mentioned, this will become more prevalent with leveraging those new features. So again, you can get to the camera from a new icon on the lock screen, and some of you might be saying, wait, I've got private photos on there that I don't want people to see. I mean, that's the whole point of having a lock screen, so people can't access your data if you've got it passcoded. The way Apple rectified that is actually very simple. What they did is allow you to take a picture but not to access your camera roll. So until you put your passcode in, you'll be able to take pictures just to give a facility to quickly snap them. You won't actually be able to view them. So that's a good separation there. As part of the camera, they've also allowed the volume button now on that being just exclusive to the iPhone, I believe. They've also allowed the volume up button to become a physical camera button. I'm not sure if that's one stage. I presume it will be if the previous incarnation was just a volume button. Nor am I sure where you'll be able to use it, because it's going to be a bit difficult distinction between tuning up the volume and actually using it as a physical camera button. Also, using a small round button as opposed to a typical more oblong camera button, less area for you to get your finger over. I'm not sure how well that's going to work, but they've allowed it anyway, so we'll have to see. The next thing I'm going to talk about, and they made some pretty big revisions and some smaller ones, but the next thing that's most important to me as a web developer and someone who watches this particular stuff very closely, and obviously views a lot the revisions to the web browser on this thing were very important to me, and most of it was talked about in relation to the iPad. So let's talk about it. You've got full tab browsing support on the all iOS devices that this is supported on. I'm quite interested to know how well this is going to function on my iPad. So for a first generation iPad, you can tell that by the back there, because this only has a 1 GHz processor, and all of that's snappy, and Apple have done a really great job optimizing it. I'm not sure how it's going to work when you've got multiple processors at the same time, and if you've got active tabs at the same time, each running Flash and JavaScript, that's going to take its toll on the memory as well, as stupidly the iPad 1 only has 256 megabytes of RAM, which I think is going to be a very limiting factor. Anyway, so they brought tab browsing to Safari. What else did they bring? Well, they brought a feature called Reader, which has been prevalent in the desktop version for quite a while. What it is it's a button you can push when you're looking at a news story, or strip away all the styling, so you've just got the content and the images from your post. Now, I've got a couple of things to say about this. Number one, it's really good because it could clean up some awful looking sites and make it work better. But for the good web designers out there, you might have worked hard to build an experience around the iPad or iPhone using media queries or JavaScript. Though you might have just built an iPad experience, but if people view articles on that site in Reader, then it's going to completely overwrite that experience. So supposedly it's going to be interesting to see how much the intelligent article recognition is going to rely not on semantic markup. So we'll just have to wait and see for that. I haven't really seen any coverage of that. Similar to that, they also brought Reading List, which is a feature that's been in. I'm pointing over to my desktop. You can't. It's a bit stupid because it's not in shot of the camera, but it's a desktop. It's been on Safari for ages as a desktop browser, and as well, Safari's been kind of leading the pack in support for HTML5, CSS, animation, CSS transitions. Again, like I said, I watch this stuff very closely, and again, Apple will be in the first in terms of the implementation of a WebKit engine to bring to bring HTML5 and CSS3 elements to mobile devices. They've brought support for things like Canvas and a whole bunch of quite nice stuff, really. So that updates to Safari, very nice there. Updates to photos, you can go and look at that in your own if you. PC free. This is another thing I wanted to talk about. They've brought this feature called PC free. So, what it essentially is especially after the iPad came out, a lot of people were referring to it, including Apple themselves. They started referring to iOS devices as post-PC devices, or devices you could use without a PC. But that was incorrect marketing, because you had to connect the PC to iTunes, familiarise it with iTunes, sync all your content over, and do it like that. This became less and less with apps from the App Store and the iTunes App Store, but that link with iTunes still needed to exist in order for you to get your content and software updates onto the device. Well, no longer. They have actually rectified that with this version, and when you first open your iOS device, as opposed to that connect to iTunes screen, you can now expect a friendly welcome message that you can actually set up your settings on the device and set up all your settings there, start getting your content. So you actually don't need to have a relationship with iTunes. Apple made a point of saying that because some of their customers now, or a lot of their customers, I should say, are in emerging markets, they needed to do this to be able to turn it a post-PC device. So that's there, and in order to do that they had to do OTA syncing, or over-the-air syncing. So as well as being able to sync with iTunes, you're also going to get software updates pushed directly to your device. And to overcome the large software updates downloading over a mobile device, which would maybe a bit problematic and take a long time, it's only going to be the Delta updates now. So you're not going to get the whole operating system as a package like you used to from the Apple update servers. You're only going to get the things that have changed. So it could go from being a few hundred megabytes to a few megabytes if it's a minor update and not a lot has changed. So from a user point of view, I can see how that's quite good, and from a data point of view, I can see how that's quite good. However, these OTA syncs are only going to be allowed over Wi-Fi, to my knowledge, so that point about data is kind of mute. As I talked about in the previous Snow Leopard announcement video, downloading parts and upgrading in place parts always frightens me, but I always think when you install a new operating system, you want a clean base to start from, and updating parts of it is just a recipe for disaster. So from a tech perspective, I'm not entirely sold on how that's going to work just yet, but we'll have to see. I'll have to give it the benefit of the doubt and just see, because it could. In general, though, I'll tell you now, I'm really excited about the PC-free possibilities. For me, with my physical issues that I have, not having to connect it to a cable every time I want to get some data off of it, it's going to be a really welcome addition, so I'm really excited to see that. Let's see what we've got next. We've got enhancements to mail, so you can format text using bold, italic and underlines. You've got rich text formatting, HTML email, which should be cool with some people. HTML email always kind of makes me shake because you have to use a load of bad markup usually to make it sync, make it work properly across different email accounts. They've also brought message flagging, which is a huge thing for some people. Some people were really excited about that, and they've just done a lot to mail. They've also added features to photos and to Game Center. You can now do turn by turn based games. Not too much to report there. This next one's a really weird one. It's specific to iPad. They've brought multi-touch gestures to the iPad. Those leaks we saw in iOS 4.3 are not leaks, but I guess the test beta had some gesture included in it that you could pinch with 4 fingers to get back to the home screen, swipe up to get your multitasking view, and they've now added some of them I should say, in the this release, so you can, I believe, swipe with 2 fingers to swipe between all your open applications, which is kind of good. I don't believe you can use 4 fingers to get to the home screen, because on these particular iterations of products, obviously there's only one. There's a home button, so there's no real need for that yet. Perhaps in the iPhone 5, next generation of the iOS 6, but I'm not so sure myself. So I think I missed a huge one. iMessage. This is the kind of should I say Apple competitor to BlackBerry Messenger, which I don't use personally. I've never used a BlackBerry in my life, but I know it's very popular. It's a messaging architecture to message between BlackBerry devices. Apple said their reason for doing this was that they wanted all iOS devices to have some way of communicating. So their way to do it was iMessage. It's kind of an instant messaging chat client. You get notifications, obviously tied into notifications, and so it's a way to send text messages and multimedia messages to people with other iOS devices. You can only do it with other iOS devices, as is typically Apple, and again that's called iMessage. I think that was the last major thing I wanted to talk about. There were some little enhancements, or should I say not little, but support for iCloud, which is Apple's brand new, much rumoured cloud-based service, which we're going to talk about in the next video. But it brought support for that. So that's it basically. I think what was interesting about the iOS 5 announcement, if you're still watching, I know this has been a really long video. I'm sorry guys. I hope some of you enjoyed it. Some of you that started won't even be watching this, because it'll just be so long. I've got no idea how long this goes. It could be 15 minutes, could be half an hour, could be an hour for all I know. Because I can't see the timer on the camera right now. Anyway, more information you needed. What I was going to say is, I think the really, or should I say, not exciting news here is what could be part of iOS 5 exclusive to the iPhone 5 or iPhone 4S, whatever you like to call it. Again, I do want to emphasise, we didn't see anything about any kind of next generation iPhone at WWDC because of all the problems between AT&T and Verizon and unifying the release cycle. Because of when it came out on Verizon last year, people are speculating that it's going to come in September, and if it came in September, then it would make logical sense for it to come in the iPod event, because that's traditionally why Apple has an event in September. So what could come as support just for the just for the iPhone 5 in iOS 5 is kind of the interesting story here. We just don't know. So let me know what you want to see in iOS 5. Do you think Apple's gonna throw something out there just for release? When do you think we're gonna see it? The Apple say autumn, but that could mean a whole load of things. They've been known to let us down in terms of release cycles. Just kind of interested to hear what you guys think. Anyway, leave those comments down below, down there. Go to my website, which should be down there to the right. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.